My name is Gregory Brennan. I'm a program coordinator here at Virginia Clean Cities, and I'll be your MC as it is for the day. Our first speaker of the day is Ron Zima. Ron Zima is a former cross-Canadian radio TV host. He is now a sustainable communicator and eco-entrepreneur. In 2006, he launched an idle reduction awareness campaign at his children's school, leading to the nonprofit Children's Clean Air Network and brands Idle Free for Our Kids and Idle Free Guy. Since 2020, he has collaborated with U.S. fleet management experts to reduce fuel waste. Ron's case studies and articles have been featured in government fleet, automotive fleet, and fleet maintenance. And fleet maintenance. I didn't realize that was a publication. Celebrating 20 years in sustainability, Ron is an active and on LinkedIn if you want to find him there, and he's an idle free guy. So with that, I'll pass it over to Ron.
Gregory, thanks very much. And Bruce and Virginia Clean Cities, also a shout out to Alan and the staff there. And I'd also like to say it's an honor to be sharing the same platform with Al Curtis and Robin Meritt, and I'm looking forward to their unique perspectives on idle. So let's talk about fleet funder operator optimization. In other words, getting the fleet funders and fleet operators on the same page. Now, this is assuming that you're making a fresh start on idle reduction, which can seem pretty daunting. But here's the bottom line right off the top. From this point of view, if your funders aren't enthused or don't believe in the value of your initiative, meaning a reliable, predictive set of numbers that vividly displays the pain points regarding the cost of doing nothing about idling, in other words, keeping the status quo, then your initiative likely isn't going to go anywhere. This is the critical step that you really should figure out first for any idle reduction strategy from this point of view. Now, that's assuming, again, that you're making a fresh start. Why? Simple answer is getting it funded is going to get it done. Slide 2, Greg. Is an idle reduction strategy worth doing? OMG. That stands for oh my goodness. Vehicle idling in park, not in traffic, for no business or creature comfort purpose, simply because of what the vehicle operator believes based on idling myths, is the biggest cost avoidance metric in fleet operations today. How can I say that? Well, slide 3. Let's take a look at the cascade of costs. The biggest cost avoidance metric conclusion was reached after some 20 years of studying the idling problem around the US and Canada. It's based on fleet analytics in different fleet sectors to implementing programs. And then since 2020, gaining decades of perspective in an idle management feedback loop with a number of top fleet management experts in the US. But as you can see here on this slide, when you're burning fuel, it leads to a whole cascade of costs, not least of which is, as you can see here, added maintenance, life cycle, vehicle downtime, employee productivity, and the rest of it. Slide 4, Greg. So what's really honed this point of view over the past 4 years are a few idle management teachers, among them Mike Antich at Bobbitt Business Media, and now a Global Fleet Hall of Famer. In fact, if you want an excellent collection on idle reduction strategies, thought leadership, metrics, Google Mike Antich, automotive fleet, and idling, and you won't be disappointed. 2 other fleet pros have been instrumental in educating on the topic over the past 4 years. Rick Longobart at Longobart Ross Consulting, a leading life cycle and total cost of operations subject matter expert, some 40 years in the government fleet space, if I'm not mistaken. Rick confirmed for this conclusion confirm the extraordinary downstream costs of idling relative to life cycle. Now, his rule of thumb is 1 hour of idle when parked is the equivalent to 30 miles traveled. Then he further pencils that out to cost roughly 30 cents for every mile idled, relative to the total cost of ownership of the vehicle, which would include fuel, added maintenance, and life cycle, not to mention carbon and exhaust emissions. So if you think about a fleet of 1,000 or 2,000 on the road assets and several hours of idle per day at all of those 30 cents for every mile idled, you get some pretty extraordinary numbers. Another teacher, George Servant, is a name many may recognize from his time at NTEA, the National Work Truck Association, and prior to that, managing large fleet operations like Florida Power and Light and Charter, now Time Warner. It was George who helped me understand that the costs of idling were probably even bigger than anticipated, and that fleet analytics would bear that out. George shared how important it is to get fleet funders and operators in sync in any idle reduction strategy. And if not, whatever that strategy is, like mentioned at the open, it's unlikely to get traction. Zero MPG and a lot of cost, just like idling itself. Slide 5, Greg. So let's dive a little deeper into fleet funder, fleet operator optimization. Who are those fleet funders in a municipal fleet agency, a utility, a corporate fleet? Well, it's the city manager's office. It's the C-suite executive team. It's the people who approve the funds. Assuming, again, this is a first real kick at idle reduction. Effectively, they're determining whether any idle initiative goes ahead or not. And the irony is, based on this point of view, these are the same very important stakeholders who often know the least about the cost carbon impact of idling. And yet, it's these same folks who are approving fleet budgets with 40 to 60% or higher rates of idle in their fossil fueled assets. One might say that they've unintentionally institutionalized high idling and its downstream cost expenditures because that's the way we've always done it. Idling's just the cost of doing business. Slide 6, Greg. Meanwhile, the fleet operations folks are typically the department and the organization that's using a multifaceted approach to managing vehicles and assets, focusing on efficiencies, compliance, safety, and of course, sustainability. Effective fleet management ensures that the organization's services are delivered reliably and efficiently while minimizing operational costs and, of course, environmental impact. That model generally works very well, except from, again, this point of view, in the case of idling, especially if you're just getting started and really trying to build momentum. Slide 7. So here's the problem with that model and the golden opportunity. Few fleet operators have instituted what my friend George Servant calls a full court press on idle management. This would include a well-crafted idling policy, idle reduction as measured key performance indicator, management bonuses and driver incentives tied to the outcomes of that KPI. Telematics, of course, to measure, and other complementary idle reduction technologies, and driver training. But first and foremost, right at the foundation, the fleet funding stakeholders should be engaged and enthused regarding the extraordinary cost, carbon, air quality opportunity, or in other words, making the business case for idle reduction with a sense of urgency and priority to the city managers or the C-suite. Now, a keystone to making the business case is interpreting the telematics and/or fuel management system data. The C-suite and city managers need to clearly understand what's at stake from a rate of, say, 45% idle, as an example, in a fleet operation of 2,000 fossil fuel vehicles. Now, a rate of 45% of idle will predictively pencil out to be millions of dollars in fuel and total cost of ownership and thousands of tons of carbon annually in a fleet of 2,000 on-the-road assets, not to mention a significant reduction in exhaust pollution and better air quality, and setting a green fleet bigger example for the public who really, by and large, think, hey, idling seems to be the thing to do, seems to be the best practice. However, right now, in effect, employees across the US and Canada are unintentionally being paid to unconsciously idle their work vehicle when it's parked with the organization's logo on the side. This behavior is based on beliefs and social memes or idling myths handed down from the carburetor age of the 1960s and 70s. Slide 8, Greg. Also, idling cost reductions by different operating departments that operate fleet vehicles don't accrue to the same budget that might fund an idle reduction program. Sustainability, for example. So as a result, there are daunting internal structural hurdles for the fleet manager to navigate before they can institute a full court press on idle reduction. So in many cases, fleet managers simply throw up their hands and focus on other priorities. But it doesn't have to be this way. Not if you begin with the end in mind. Begin with the funders and getting them enthusiastically engaged with predictive cost reduction outcomes that they'll understand and appreciate. Slide 9, Greg. So in conclusion, consider these 2 steps to fleet funder operator optimization. Create an idle reduction stakeholder group, a one stakeholder group with the mission of reducing idling costs and emissions. And that's formed representing all organization departments with vehicles and those departments that may not have vehicles, but do have a vested interest in carbon reduction, such as sustainability. Now, this stakeholder group should be equipped with a mandate of reducing idling by various means and best practices, from policy to making idling a strategic priority, an accountable KPI, to technology to training. And this unified group will be the bridge facing the funders, the executive, allowing the organization and its fleet to act with a unified voice. Is this a tailpipe dream? Maybe. But it is possible. Slide 10. And make that business case with an idle reduction stakeholder group, a mandate, and a plan, getting staff to run the analytics from telematics and/or your fuel management system, washing out business idle, such as power takeoff to operate the bucket truck, for example. And then you're left with the raw run rate of engine hours at idle for no operational purpose or due to lack of extreme weather, which we're experiencing now. And that is almost always a very big total cost of ownership and tons of carbon number. And with this 2-step approach, you've got a good shot and strategic foundation from this point of view, from which to achieve dramatic cost and carbon reductions, radically reducing institutionalized idling expenditures while improving air quality for everybody, not least of which are the vehicle operators themselves and their kids. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ron. I appreciate that. That was fantastic. We have 3 speakers. Ron is one of 3. And up next, we have Robin Meritt of Lynchburg, Virginia. Robin Meritt is the Assistant Fleet Director for the City of Lynchburg, Virginia. She has a demonstrated history as a fleet manager working in the government fleet administration for nearly 15 years. She also serves as a regional director of the National Association of Fleet Administrators, NAFA. So with that, I will pass things over to Robin, and right after her, we will have Al Curtis, and he will be the anchor for today. And then at the end, we'll have some questions. Sorry, again, I forgot to put that at the beginning. But so with that, I'll pass it to Robin.
Good afternoon, everybody. All right, I'm gonna tell you about all of the city of Lynchburg's path to idle reduction, and I'm gonna focus most of this about our journey to EVs. But I'm gonna tell you everything that we've done as far as idle reduction, as far as the last few years is concerned. Of course, regarding electric vehicles, in the beginning, like anything new, we knew nothing. So we got to work. And in the beginning, Chuck Kramer, my director, and I, we were listening, paying attention to the industry, understood that things were changing. Everybody was getting busy about electric vehicles and getting serious about them. Laws were changing, and we were paying attention to that, as I'm sure most of you are too. We don't really have a choice about that. So we were trying to gain some knowledge. But it wasn't until laws changed that we got to work. And we started attending conferences, classes, webinars. We went to everything we could in all of our NAFA classes, at GFX, Virginia Clean Cities. We asked questions, we listened, we read things, we studied. We called fleet colleagues who, we knew already had electric vehicles in their fleet. We called our utility representatives. We Googled things. We did everything we could to try to gain knowledge. So we were doing all of that just to try to learn anything and everything we could about electric vehicles. During all of this time, we were still doing other things to do idle reduction within our fleet, because we were a long ways off from starting an electric vehicle program within our fleet. So, we did all of that, and, idle reduction is just not all about electric vehicles. There's other things you can do besides electric vehicles, and electric vehicles were still a long ways off. We were really doing this back many years ago, starting to learn, and we knew we had a lot to learn. So if you haven't started anything yet, or you're just beginning, learn, ask questions, listen, read, study, and eventually, it's really not rocket science. Eventually, you'll have to just get started. So one of the things that I'll do here today is just take you through a broad overview of what we did, and the main thing was we learned and learned and learned, and we finally got to a place where we said, whoa, this is a lot of information. And one of the things that you can do, and the best thing, is to talk to people like Virginia Clean Cities, take the classes, but get to know your fleet colleagues. If you don't already know a lot of them, get to know them, attend conferences and get to know people and network, and ask questions of them, email them, call them, whatever. Don't flood them with a million questions at once. Ask a couple questions at a time. Eventually, we realized we just had information overload, and we were kind of going around in circles, and we didn't know whether to put the cart before the horse. And so we got to work developing a plan. And so we just decided to start with an EV pilot program, because our Chuck's boss at the time really wanted us to switch mostly our entire fleet over to EVs by 2030. And we were overwhelmed by that idea. And so we just said, okay, we'll just start a pilot program for now, and meaning a very small number of electric vehicles. We'll purchase a few, and we'll buy those vehicles, and we'll buy some infrastructure. Okay, next slide. So the way that we went about doing this is that we talked to our customers, and we talked and we talked and we talked. We didn't get a whole lot of feedback at first. You know, to get that started, it was sort of like pulling teeth. You know, we went about that several different ways, and we weren't getting a lot done. You know, originally we thought about offering electric vehicles to our drivers to take home, where they would plug those in at home and charge them overnight. That flatlined. Nobody really responded to that. I think our drivers were concerned that their electric bills would skyrocket, because our electric company could not tell us anything about what that would do to our employees' electric bills. Our electric company could tell us really nothing about what would happen to our city's electric bills if we put in infrastructure. As a matter of fact, our utility company was really not much help at all to us. They didn't know a lot. After meeting with us a couple of times, they finally ended up hiring somebody to help them with EVs coming on board into our city. So they were highly unprepared for electric vehicles in this area. So we decided to just continue gathering data, and we developed a use case study of our vehicles and our fleet. Now, gathering data, I'm going to look here at some of my notes. We did things like we gathered greenhouse gas information on all of our vehicles, you know, like which items, assets in our fleet were, you know, creating the biggest, you know, the largest amount of greenhouse gases. And in our use case study, we were really looking at things like that are on this slide, assets, you know, that we could replace in our fleet, you know, whether or not the vehicles were take-home vehicles, what's the age, you know, was it nearing replacement, how many miles had it driven so far, how many did it drive daily, weekly, monthly, you know, the averages of those, you know, how far did it drive from its parking location, you know, whether it was outside of a 100-mile range, you know, whether it would have time to recharge between shifts. We even looked at, you know, how many passengers were in a car in that vehicle each day, you know, whether it went off-road, that kind of thing. So we were really taking a hard look at that vehicle. Sadly, we didn't have AVL on our vehicles, all of our vehicles. We had it on some, but not all. AVL really would have helped had we had that. And we also asked our customers, we asked, you know, opinions of our customers, like which ones they would have liked to have had replaced by EV. So we gathered all that data. All right, next slide, please. So while we were doing all of this electric vehicle stuff, we did some other things. So we had a no idle policy as early as 2009. Now, we might have had one before then, but I hadn't been able to find one. And in 2017, we rewrote the no idle policy with a very much a renewed sense of purpose. That was strong. And our city manager and Chuck Kramer at the time worked on that together, and they worked hard to get the word out to everyone in the city about the purpose behind it, and why it was so important for drivers to turn off their vehicles and not let it sit there on job sites and idle, and why officers should turn off their vehicles whenever possible, instead of just letting their vehicles just sit in, you know, in a driveway running for no reason at all. I mean, sometimes officers have to let their vehicles run, but not always. And there was just a huge push on that, and it seemed to do a lot of good. And it's really important when you have a policy like this that you, every so many years, you bring it back out and you send it out to your employees and you remind them. Otherwise, people become complacent. And that had happened here. And we did see some pretty big drops in our gallons of fuel used because of this. And I just went back and I looked at how much our fuel dropped, and there was some pretty big fuel gallons that were saved during that time. So that made a pretty big difference, I think, in that. Now, you have drivers who had attitudes of, I'm not turning my vehicle off, like especially during snow events. Some drivers didn't like that. They said that their vehicle was their office, and other drivers were very much more respectful of the policy and the sense of authority that the city manager had, and would respect the policy. So it's just a matter of supervisors keeping a watch on things like that. And like for instance, at one snow event, I happened to go around Public Works and noticed several dump trucks just sitting out in the parking lot running during a snow event, and while people were inside eating their dinner. And it's important that, and it wasn't even snowing outside, and it really wasn't that cold. And so, it's important to make sure you watch things like that so that people don't just ignore the policies. So another thing that we did was we replaced 14 vehicles with hybrids, hybrid electric vehicles in 2023. After we researched their value. Now, this was something that made a big difference in our fuel gallons. And that I just bring up the fuel gallons as a result of that being a big deal as far as cost savings goes. But our police officers really seem to love those hybrid electric vehicles, especially initially when we first bought those. We did see those our purchases in fuel, like I said, drop. And between 2019 and 2023, we added 19 hybrid electric vehicles to our fleet, 14 of which was in 2023. And I did an average of our fuel purchases between 2014 and 2018, and then an average of our fuel gallons purchased between 2019 and 2023. And they dropped in those 5 years, the averages of purchases, and but comparing those 2 5-year periods by 75,000 gallons. And that is really significant considering that our the number of vehicles we had in our fleet actually went up in those, comparing those 2 5-year periods. So that was significant. Another thing that I mentioned earlier is that for AVL, we historically only had that on our snow and our refuse and a few of our water resource assets. And over the past 6 months, we've added AVL to almost all of the rest of our fleet. And so having that on our assets will give us, usage data, correct mileage, how many times a vehicle has been driven. Most of you should know, what we'll get on our get with AVL. So, we'll have the truth about our fleet. And it would have been nice to have it, like I said, to do a use case study. But it's going to help us to move from an EV pilot program to, more fully electrify our fleet. Okay, next slide. There we go. So then, those were the things that we were doing. Now with our EV pilot program, we only purchased 7 electric vehicles, and we ordered those from an existing contract, and we bought 7 Bolt UV electric vehicles. And those arrived really quickly, and we were not expecting that. You know how you buy vehicles today and it takes forever to get them. Well, they arrived really fast. We were not expecting it. They arrived, and I mentioned, you know, whether you put the cart before the horse. Well, they arrived and we didn't have any way to charge them. Fortunately, Virginia Clean Cities provided us with a free charger that got us through until we received our chargers. And so as far as the infrastructure goes, we met with several vendors and received quotes, and we finally made our choice and used Sourcewell to place an order for our chargers. Now, as far as our chargers go, that took a while to get the chargers up and running. It was a long time. It was not the most pleasant of experiences because there were a lot of problems with that, but I'll go into that here in a few minutes. But let's see here. Well, once we did get the chargers, we did work really quickly with our Public Works Department to get them in place. And our Public Works Department was great at helping us. To get all the chargers in place was the difficulty. We were able to get several of them up and running well, but to get all of them going, that was the problem. We did make a really fun day out of rolling out the electric vehicles to the city, and we invited the media here, and it was this big, huge deal to the city. And it was pretty cool. It was pretty fun, and everybody was all excited about it. And we did issue the electric vehicles to each department one by one and got them used to them. And we don't hear any complaints about them at all. So that's really, really good. Next slide, please. Now, one of the things, I will go back and tell you this about our charging company. One of the reasons why we had trouble with the infrastructure is that the company that we decided to go with got sold after we placed our order. So that was a little bit of the trouble. And, you know, we've had that happen to us a few times. But anyway, that's the way it goes. Now, one thing that we've done since we started our pilot program and got the infrastructure is that we are continuing with our data. We've installed the AVL, and we're working with Utilimark, which is a data analytics company, to help us with all the data we have. So, you know, we have our fleet management information system, and we have our fuel system, and you know, now we've got AVL, and we have all this data coming from so many different directions. And so we need to be able to gather the costs from everything, and we need to know the locations. We need to know, we need to know utilization, suitability. We want to be able to track the ICE vehicles, the hybrid electric vehicles, the electric vehicles. We want to track them separately and together. And, we want to, and Utilimark even will help us with benchmarking with other peers. And so we get all that information from Utilimark. And so we're using them to help us with all of that. And So in the past year, we've been doing all of that with Utilimark, and we've been working to get our AVL up and running. So data is extremely important when you're working to do idle reduction. It helps you know where you've got problems and your gaps, and where you need to improve. And with the infrastructure, we're hoping for no more problems. We think we've got everything worked out. And oh, that's one other thing with data. We'll be getting information from our chargers to let us know what's happening there. And that information will go into Utilimark as well. So all of that is happening. And I'm looking to see if there's anything else I want to tell you about all of this. Oh, we've got budget implications, and we want to make sure that we're not missing anything as far as our budget is concerned. I'm not seeing a huge hit on our electric bills here at any of our departments, really, with the electric chargers. So, but we've only got 7 vehicles. So that's, not enough to make a big difference. I'm sure as we continue to grow the electric fleet, that's going to be different. So, we would be replacing electricity for fuel. So that's going to become, an issue at some point. And we've got to determine, whether or not, electricity is more than gas, or gas is less than, which is costing us more. Is it the same, or is it less? Electricity is less than, gas. Hopefully electricity is less than gas. We'll see about that. And I'm expecting electricity to be less, but, we'll see what kind of tariffs and that kind of thing that'll happen with electricity. I worry that utility companies will try to monopolize on that kind of thing. So we'll see. Right now, we are rewriting our sustainability plan and creating a fleet modernization team to help us with what is to happen next. We're researching emissions reduction targets and trying to decide what to replace and with what, as far as electric vehicles are concerned. And we're also creating our staff training plan. We've increased our budget for training on electric vehicle maintenance and repairs. Really maintenance at this point. And getting ready for when the warranties come off. And we're setting our cost savings targets, and a whole lot more goes into that whole plan. But I can give you more about that later, but I think it's probably getting close to time for Al to speak. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Robin. I appreciate that. Yeah, it is. We are approaching time. So, Al, you got about 10 to 12 minutes. If you need more time, that's totally okay. We can figure it out. But our final speaker is Al Curtis. Al Curtis is the 2019 Legendary Lifetime Achievement Award for Government Fleet Magazine recipient with over 29 years of experience. Al is currently the fleet service director of Cobb County and has served in both the public and private sector. Al manages over 2,500 assets for Cobb County and the diverse fleet of vehicles. So with that, I'll pop it over to Al.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Al Curtis here, Cobb County Fleet Management. This right here is an overview slide. Actually, we do about 2,600 vehicles now and climbing as well. We've launched a take-home program for our officers. This is, I think, 2 years in running, and our fleet is consistently growing. As you can see, over 10 million miles traveled. We do about 5 different diverse fueling options to make sure our fleet stays diversified. So if the pipeline goes down with fuel, we have electric, we have propane, we have CNG, and also we've used biodiesel as well in the past. About 10% of our fleet is alternatively fueled. So we want to stay on that cutting edge of diversibility in our fleet. to make sure we stay sustainable and resilient. About 65 total EVs, that's total EVs running on battery power, about 50 charging stations. We also have over 156 hybrid vehicles within our police department, solar arrays, and we have about a decade or so in sustainable projects. This right here is basically some of the vehicles that we house and some of our accolades. We've been part of a 100 Best Fleet for a lot of years. We miss Tom Johnson as well. Next slide. Well, we talk about idle reduction, okay? How we can reduce our greenhouse gas emission and how we can save money. Of course, there's always challenges in there. Ron did a really good job earlier in talking about some of the challenges and who we need to get at the table when talking about, idle reduction, the plan, the funding. That's the who, what, and why. The who is your stakeholders. The what, we want to try to reduce idling. And why, that's a given. The two presenters before me talked about the why. Saving the money, climate, reduction in engine wear. And we're going to talk about barriers, of course. We need to educate. Ron did a really good job of talking about educating the C-suite and also educating most of our stakeholders as well. Once when you educate, if you have their buy-in, you're going to go ahead and acclimate to the reduction in idling, that whatever type of solution you want to integrate into that. You want to acclimate them to it, get them used to it, talk about it, touch it, feel it, understand why, when, and how it functions. And then, of course, evaluate the outcome. Is it reducing idling? Is it saving you money? Is it reducing your CO2 emissions? So there's a lot that goes into deploying any particular type of solution. But of course, in idling, it is a lot tougher because people have been so used to doing the same thing over and over again. And to get them to change culture, change the way they drive a vehicle, it's difficult, but it's doable. It's definitely doable. Next slide. So we'll talk about my journey and our journey here at Cobb County. We started the journey of idle reduction back in 2008 when we had Crown Vics within our fleet. I knew that these vehicles, they're both mostly in police operation, and we know police do more idling than most. So we wanted to reduce that particular idling and just bring it to our drivers' attention. So we installed hour meters in these vehicles. Those vehicles back then didn't have idle meters in them. It wasn't built in, integrated into the vehicle. So we actually added those to the vehicle so the drivers could get acclimated to how many hours they're idling. Getting them acclimated to and getting them to understand that the idling, one, is costing them money in their budget. Two, it's actually putting more wear on the engine that it really needs to have. Ron made a good point about the 30 miles per every hour an engine is idling. So if you just think about our police and public safety folks, how much they drive and how much they sit and idle and do their work at their office, which is their vehicle. So we actually installed those and monitored that, and just bringing it to their attention kind of help us reduce that idling in the police sector. And another thing we did going back, 2010, we launched a telematics protocol for several of our on-call vehicles that go out and rescue vehicles and repair vehicles out in the field, and some of our non-public safety vehicles. We deployed the telematics platform, which was the hardwire type, not the plug and play like we have right now, the geotabs and such. Those devices allowed us to manage the idling of those particular trucks, which sent alerts back to the email. They didn't send them back to the phones at that particular time. That was an early stage of telematics. So again, we started thinking about reducing idling and reducing engine wear, reducing our cost early on. So we have a little bit of experience within that particular piece. So we launched that back in 2010 with the telematics. And it really did well. It allowed us to kind of manage and monitor those drivers that were out there that were idling for a significant amount of time. And the email alert would come to our emails, and we'd pick up the phone and said, hey guys, are you in the vehicle, out of the vehicle? Are you using a PTO that it has to run? And over a period of time, we didn't have to make those calls. They're more cognizant of their idling time, and they're more cognizant of knowing that we can see and get alerts when they've been idling for hours and hours on end. Okay, that actually rolls us up to this slide that we have right here, part of our electrification movement. I mean, we launched electrification early on, back 2014, 2015 is when we deployed 16 Nissan Leafs, and also you think about electric motorcycles. Most people don't know that these electric bikes, they've been on the market for a pretty good long time. And the reason why we went to electric motorcycles is because we patrol a lot of Silver Comet trails where a lot of our citizens, they walk and they enjoy the outdoors, they enjoy the environment. And I don't know if you know or not, but a standard dirt bike or a motorcycle produces about 19.5 pounds of CO2 emissions per every hour it idles, or for every hour it runs as well. So, and of course, the noise, the smoke, and most of our citizens don't want to experience that on the Silver Comet Trail when they're trying to enjoy the environment. So we actually had our police department, Ranger Division, test drive these vehicles. We did ride and drives. We looked at the different duty cycles on how far these vehicles drive. And we partnered with a company called Wild Motors, which deployed these Zero motorcycles to the Rangers. So we tested them for a few months. The Rangers really liked them. The citizens applauded that because they were so quiet and they didn't produce any emissions. So that was a definitely win-win in that particular case when it comes down to the Rangers, and also looking at our citizens on, again, it's electric, so there's no idling. There's no CO2 emissions being emitted in the air. And of course, if you have the citizens on board, hey, you've done something well. Next slide. This right here is more part of our electrification movement. Again, like I said, we deployed electrification back in 2014 with 16 Nissan Leafs. The reason we did that, we looked at a lot of the old Crown Vics we had and some of the vehicles within our fleet that idled a lot, that were getting 6 to 7 miles per gallon. And just from a standpoint of economics, I mean, we're putting so much money into these vehicles to keep them on the road, and they're burning fuel. The total cost of ownership just was skyrocketing. So with electrification on the forefront, at that point, Georgia, we had a 7,500 tax credit. And of course, there was a 7,500 federal tax credit as well. So we used those tax credit and leveraged that to purchase fully electric vehicles. But of course, before we did that, we did ride and drives. We did data analysis on duty cycles for the vehicles that we've been looking to replace. And all in all, our operators and the people that test drove these vehicles in the ride and drives fell in love with them. Push to start, heated steering wheels, new technology, they were totally on board with it. Down below, we have our public safety, our sheriff's department, where we were talking with them. We had some issues with the transit vans, where Ford stopped in production right in the middle of our order. And they really needed a prisoner transport van. So we looked at electric prisoner transport van and partnered with a company called EVT and launched the first in the country electric prisoner transport van here in Cobb County. That's me shaking hands with the sheriff. He was very happy about that because, one, it allowed him to put this van in the service. Zero emission, has the same capability as the transit counterpart, and which saved us about $40,000 over a 3-year period just by deploying this particular vehicle. The cost of the vehicle plus the fuel savings and also the maintenance cost savings as well. And the next picture here is me with the sheriff again when we deployed 4 Mach-E's into their department, which is used for serving warrants and also doing some patrolling. So just by letting them know the benefits of electrification and reducing the idling, reducing the cost, reducing the wear and tear on the engines, brought public safety totally on board with our electrification and less idling movement. And of course, with electrification, you're not doing any idling. So the more in electrification you can do, the more you can reduce your total greenhouse gas emissions that's being emitted in your department, in your county, your city, or your state. Next slide. Well, let me talk about this real quick. This is a program that was from the DOE. I'm not sure if it's still being funded right now, but it was a free telematics program where you can get free geotabs, and they use them as data loggers to collect data, so you can know where technology and where electrification would fit within the dynamics of your organization. And another reason they did it is they wanted to find out the utilization of EVs, because a lot of people, they weren't really familiar with electrification. They felt like they didn't have enough infrastructure to support it. But with the actual data loggers, the geotabs, it showed the actual distance vehicles are driving, shows where they were driving, to allow DOE to make really good decisions on policies and programs that would actually aid the adoption of electrification. Next slide. This right here is just some of the cost savings that we've experienced with Derive. Derive is actually a software that actually reduces, it changes the shift points in the computer of your vehicle, and also lowers the idle points in your vehicle. So this is a low cost option where you can actually reduce your idling, reduce greenhouse gas emissions in your vehicles. It's a software, we've been utilizing it for about 8 years, and we've launched it out in the latest launch was about 35 Tahoes, and it was Tahoes and also some F-150s not F-150s, Tahoes and some admin vehicles that we had launched this program in, and significant reduction in CO2 emissions, significant reduction in idle time as well. So if you're interested in a low cost way to be able to actually reduce idling, change shift points, and add actually speeding parameters, Derive would be a really good choice for you guys. Next slide. Again, this is some of the projected ROIs that we received. 2023, gas prices about $3.57. With Derive technology, with lowering the shift points, lowering the idle points, and changing the shift points to get more performance out of the vehicles. And most of Derive that we actually launched were in police vehicles, because when we changed the shift points in the vehicles, it allowed the police to have a quicker start off point and great top speed. So that was a win-win for them, and of course a win-win for us, because if you can see, it reduced about 266 gallons worth of fuel in each vehicle, and over a 3-year point, it reduces about 79, almost 8,000 gallons. The cost savings in the fuel within the first year was about $9,000, and over a 3-year period, $28,000 over the 35 vehicles that actually we installed them on, reducing a metric ton, about 24 metric tons of CO2 emissions. And it's equivalent to taking about 5 vehicles off the road within a year basis. So, and that's average savings total of the fuel and carbon reductions on 35 of our vehicles. And most of those vehicles were the Tahoes, and like I said, some admin vehicles that we actually have in the police department as well. And there's quite a few different idle reduction softwares, not softwares, but hardwares that are out there. One's called the Eco Idle Tech. It's a battery powered idle mitigation system. And also there's another system that's out there. It's called the EPQE IM hybrid system. This system can go on heavy duty truck applications and also light duty. So there's a variety of different options out there for idle mitigation. You just have to take a look and do your research on it. But like I said, a software option would be a Derive. It runs about $499 per VIN number, and significantly reduces, the idle points, and also enhances the shift points for your drivers. Next slide. We also instituted about 20 years ago a no idling policy, which I think Robin mentioned you need to update this and revisit it almost on a 2-year or yearly basis because things change so much. Turn the key, pretty catchy slogan, right? Turn the key, be idle free. And it basically just talks about the different things, how you can actually reduce idling. And it also talks about exemptions for people that have no choice but to idle. And I think Robin made some points about if it's cold outside, snow events, and it's really hot in Georgia, of course. So we really have to be cognizant of the people that are out there working if they need to have the air conditioning going. One thing that can help with that is electric PTOs, which we've launched that in some of our bucket trucks that allow the truck to be turned off with the PTO still running. Next slide. We also launched our Ask the EV Expert. This is another program that we launched to kind of bring electrification to the forefront. We've launched a employee no charge charge program. We have electric vehicle technicians. Since we've been working on electric vehicles for almost a decade, we have very seasoned people that know how to work on these vehicles. And also we have charge station maintenance that we actually have that we've deployed also since we, of course, we have the vehicles, we have to maintain the charging stations. We do quarterly videos and segments on our EVs. And also we have a Q&A email portal where people can ask about electrification. Next slide. That's my time. I thank everyone for the participation and the attentiveness.
Thank you so much, Al. That was extremely informative. I really appreciate it. Thanks again to Ron, Robin, and Al for a phenomenal presentation today, an all-star cast of idle reduction strategies for you and your fleet. Like I said, my name is Gregory Brennan, and with Virginia Clean Cities, my number and email are over here on the right. Bruce Vilk is also on this call. His email and phone number are also on the left. And then, of course, on the bottom, we have Ron, Robin, and Al's all contact information. Any last words for this, for the people here today?
Hey, it was just great being on the panel with you folks. Thank you very much. It was great. Thank you.
Thank
sure.
you.
Thank you.
Feel free to email me if you need me or call me.
Will do. All right. Well, thank you guys so much. Everyone have a lovely evening on your Thursday and enjoy your Friday.
Thanks,
Thank
guys.
you.